You are now entering the Cue The Muses podcast. Please reserve submission of any joy meter statistics until after the program.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Ash.
Hello, Dick.
Welcome.
Welcome back to our podcast.
Welcome to
Cue
the
the
Cue the
Muses.
Muse podcast, the podcast that advertises the web show that is Cue the Muses.
That's right. It can be a little confusing for people, but our actual show is a sci-fi comedy, scripted, and we are a rock band, and in each episode we unveil a new song off of our yet-to-be released album, and that is how it's unveiled as part of the unfolding story of fighting an evil AI.
Exactly. And we want to tell you that, or remind you that every time, for maybe new viewers that think that Cue the Muses is just this podcast, but really this podcast is just the two of us advertising what Ash just said. Exactly.
Yes, we want people to know about the show, but there's so many things to talk about and so many people to explore, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. Kind of. Wait, what?
What?
Can you repeat
No,
that?
wait, I'm married. What am I talking about?
Oh, happy birthday. Happy late birthday, Amy.
Yes, my wife's birthday just happened. She turned 20.
An age. She turned an age.
Well, now I sound
She
like
turned
I'm a
new age.
cradle robber.
Yeah.
That's
That's awesome that her and Kyron's birthday is so close together, because tomorrow is my son Kyron's birthday.
beautiful. You can say what his age is. What's that?
Yeah, he will be 14 years old. 14.
Awesome, man.
He got a new Sterling Stingray 4-string bass for his birthday. It's bitching. He loves it. He slaps it. He's a better musician than me already. you know, when you're at that age, you absorb so much so quick. And he's just got the edge, like, and he's been tracking with me here at the house. He's been doing some recordings with me here at my home studio. And it was like, I was telling him the other day, it's like, man, you're so, I feel so proud and lucky and, grateful for him. And the fact that he gets to be able to record things. Like, I have this set up at the house to record music. And I remember when I was that age, when I was like 14 and 15, trying to start a band, trying to write music and trying to document that music, like being able to record was a thing. That was a unicorn that you had to find. Like, there weren't studios everywhere. Nobody didn't have a home. Everyone didn't have a home studio set up to record everything. Like, you had to go find a professional studio, and then you had to pay a lot of money, like by the hour usually, to do it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I had a Roland, I don't remember the model number, but it was one of those standalone Roland analog, 8-track recorders. You could do 8 tracks. Now get this.
Simultaneously.
You could even set those to the side and record 8 more on top of it. But, you couldn't hear all of it at one time per se. Like, you just kept stacking shit until you had 16 tracks. And I never got that far because it was too complicated and I was too amateur at it at that age, Man,
but yeah. I remember in the first band I was in, it was a Fostex, the Fostex brand, like a Fostex something. It had 2 inputs, and you could track up to like 5 or 6 tracks. And there was a little, it was a digital display that was more like a Game Boy screen.
Totally. That's what it is.
Levels of it, it was so bad, but it's everything's come so far. So I have a Pro Tools 12 rig, which essentially is the same thing that Brett has. Brett Hestla, the engineer and producer that we recorded our album with, he runs a Pro Tools 12 rig too. The difference is he's him and I'm me. So his level is up here and my level is, where's my hand? Down here. But you can
have the same tools, but the knowledge set that goes along with stuff. And I mean, he does have more invested in his preamps and things too, correct?
For sure. Like he has some his studio is set up professionally for professional gear, professional recorders. I mean, he
Yeah.
records people. Sorry, excuse me. He records bands that have professional releases that are I don't want to drop names or anything, but Brett has recorded some pretty serious releases.
Yeah.
And it's the difference is with mine, like I use mine primarily for pre-production stuff.
Right.
It's like recording with Brett, and the other thing you get is you get him as
Right.
the human element of the recording. And, when you go somewhere, like you've recorded with Lee Dyess at Earth Sound Studios, right?
Yeah, that's the first recording experience I had, and he's fantastic. I mean, he's a amazing person to be around. He was a huge little off the track here for a second, but he really, during our recording experience, we ended up actually staying in his house for like a week. It's a long story why it worked out that way, but he actually hosted us in his house. And during that time, every night would stay up with him, and me and him in particular would have these long late night conversations. And he really gave me the encouragement to go for the video thing, to actually invest and get the cameras. He had seen some of the little work I had done with camcorders, consumer level. And I came back from that trip and I got a credit card and I bought my first real prosumer level camcorders. Those were still standard definition at the time, but they were called Panasonic DVX 100Bs. I got a pair off eBay and really, really went for beginning my actual video production career. So he's always going to have
so
my heart.
I didn't know that. That was like that conversation with Lee was the catalyst for Ash to get the first real, big boy camera.
Yeah, I mean, really, like that encouragement from somebody that was able to. He had done some really big bands at the time. He was really blowing up. He was doing a lot of bands for Epitaph Records, and Mayday Parade had just landed out of Tallahassee, and for a while there, they were a really big deal. And I thought they sounded great, and that was actually their recording is what made Kill Clouseau, my old band, want to go record with him. And he was only an hour and a half away in Valdosta. And we recorded with him twice. We did an EP and then we did a full album. So, I mean, he's got, he's a great experience. He's a great sound engineer and everything. But that was the first experience. And then, I won't go to the next chapter yet, but Brett, as far as Brett goes, two very different styles and approaches. And for what we were trying to do and the way that our sound is in this project, it was kind of like he's, to me, like the perfect engineer for what we're trying to do. It's just he's able to make things sound so big, and this music's trying to sound really big. It's like it's pretty, these songs are pretty large sounding and they're going a lot of places. We had to have it sound big. And then the other thing about it is, just as a guitarist, I've recorded with Lee and I've recorded with Applehead Recording, which is the same producers that did Coheed and Cambria. They're two of their largest albums. And that was a great experience. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But guitar tone wise, I've personally never gotten to hear my guitar sound the way that way before. And I loved it. I just feel like he nailed the guitar tone that I really wanted to have. Brett.
Yeah. And Brett is a guitar player / vocalist. I think, when he was in his first band was called Virgo's Merlot, and he was the singer and guitar player. And he taught me things, when the first time I recorded with Brett, I was in a band with Timbo, our drummer from Cue The Muses. It was a band called Pipestone. I was only in Pipestone for, less than 1 year, but I did go to the studio and do the 3-song EP at Brett's studio when he had his studio in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I got in and met Brett and realized, like, I was a little starstruck. He had been the vocalist for Dark New Day, and I had this clear image of the man, the myth, the legend, this front man. It was Clint Lowry from Seven Dust, Corey Lowry from Stereo Mud. It was, Will Hunt, the drummer from Scrape, and then Brett's up there, and he's got this, his I remember seeing him live for the first time. He's got that angel tattoo on the back of his head. And I was like, wow, this guy, and he just killed it. I mean, that performance was uncanny. And then I am, as a 25-year-old boy recording in his studio. I was like, but,
you sound starstruck now.
But then, when that session was kind of, that was a long time ago. Then more recently, he relocated his studio to Tennessee, and I took my band Fighting Giants up there to do our first five. We did a full length album. Actually, it was 8 songs, and man, it was so personal. It wasn't a big studio. He's got a smaller space, and it's like, he just knows guitar. He knows tone. He'll stop you in the middle of the recording and say, "Hey, no, give it here. Give it here. Give it up." And you got to give him your guitar, and he'll tune it. He'll get it. Okay. He'll intonate it. Yep. Okay. That's good.
He intonates more than any engineer I've recorded with. I mean, but I love it. I had no idea that was a thing, that you would actually, depending on the part, his ear is so specific that depending on the part that you're playing, he'll intonate the guitar for that section that you are working on, because the reality is that a guitar is not in perfect tune across the board, start to finish. It's going to be more in tune for particular things, and he'll figure that out.
Yeah, and it changes even if he'll ask you, are you gonna stand or are you gonna sit down? Because it's different. There's a different tension on the wood if you're standing up or if you're sitting down, because it pulls tension on the horn. And it also comes down to if your instrument's cold. I remember one time I went into a studio. It was early in the morning. It's in Tennessee. We usually track for some reason, like in January, and it was cold. And I brought my guitar and it was cold. And he literally picked it up and hugged it and swayed with it. And I was like, oh man, I'm getting all this awesome Brett Hestla juju on my guitar right now. I'm like, this is pretty cool.
Groping my guitar up and down.
Taught me how to intonate, taught me how to, the string mutes at the top of the bridge up there, right at the nut when you tape over the string, so they don't give that, they whine and they kind of howl a little bit, and just so much knowledge that dude has. And it's like every time I talk to him, I learn something about who I want to be, as that kind of that kind of person, that kind of human.
Yeah. Well, if you don't mind, let me just to give people some concept of what the kind of sounds he produces. Here's a clip from one of our Cue the Muses songs, just a short clip, so you can kind of hear some of the tonal qualities that he's touching on this. Actually, I thought I had that loaded up. Sorry, here we go.
Uh-oh.
He always never lost a final thought, but at what cost? Everything, but at what cost? Everything, but at what cost?
Yeah. That's the longest clip I'll play, I promise. But it's just going so many places. That's the kind of the cleaner, symphonic, like spacey sound that he's able to get that still sounds so big.
Oh yeah, and he has Brett's guitar cab. I don't know if I'm not going to tell you what he has because it's his rig, but he has a cab and it's the cab. It's an incredible cab. It's set up in a separate area from his studio, and his mic placement. When I track my guitars, it's just a 57 and an E609, and it's off axis, and two of them sound pan right and left for one guitar, or both panned 100% and 3/4 one way, and then another track. He has a setup with at least 5 mics. So he gets the midway room. He gets all 4 speakers on that cabinet, that amazing cabinet that he has. And there's no duplicate mics either. It's all 4 speakers, different mics. And if you know anything about recording, like the microphone affects your tone more so even than a different amp or a different speaker cabinet, just a different mic. And so he has all these tones that are just integrated, blended in. As a guitar player, it's butter, man. It's so good. I mean, you plug in and he has, you don't even have to bring anything. The way he has his studio set up is genius. You don't have to bring anything. I mean, he has guitars on the walls. He has amplifiers stacked up in the corner. This thing that I do back here with my amps, that's just me copying Brett. Because he has even more. He has one all the way to the top with a modded Marshall JCM 800, the PRS Archon, a couple of old Rivera Knuckleheads. If you ever heard Rivera Knucklehead, that's what Korn famously recorded their first album, the very first one with like the Chutes and Ladders song and that on it. It was with a Knucklehead. Right?
Wasn't that Peach?
Peach?
Or is that their second album?
That was Life is Peachy. Second album, still with the Riveras. Still with Riveras. That was before they switched over to Mesas, I do believe.
It's been a while since I visited old Korn. Man, I was way into Korn for a stint there.
Well, remember, I have a 14-year-old son, so he's all about.
They had a sound, man. I mean, they totally had a sound. They still are around, but they've gotten a lot more electronic sounding, and it's like, I don't know. I haven't fully checked back in on it, but when they came out, those first 3 out, well, really even 4 albums, I liked them up through Issues. I followed pretty heavily up through that whole era. But no, Brett, I mean, we brought our amp heads, but we also did use some of his other amps during that because it just depended on what the part was. However, he did love our heads. I would say that we used each of our heads the most predominantly on the record because they were kind of the sounds that we can't use to come up with our parts with. The Spawn was heavily used out of Black Star.
100%. He told me I'll brag on the Spawn a little bit because when I brought it in there, he said, "Oh, a Spawn. I've been wanting to try one of these." And it's a fully loaded nitro. It's got the drop B plus where it ups the plate voltage. And me and him were nerding out about it. And he played a little bit. He was like, "Oh," he said, man." He said, "I might need to buy another amp." He's like, "I might need to buy another amp." He was
going wild about
it. And every time I talk to him, he's like, "You gonna bring my amp up here?"
Nice.
And then, but then when you started tracking with the Black Star,
it was a new model at the time.
Yeah, he was like, "Man, listen to that Black Star. That thing don't count out the Black Star."
Right. It worked out well. Yeah, and that was actually the first tube amp I've ever owned because the whole career of Clouseau I was playing in solid state amp, and it was all, and I was using I switched. At first, it was a Line 6 pod. That was the very infancy beginning. But then I switched over to a Boss GT8 multi-effects pedal, 2 of which, that's why there's 2 in the background of the Cue The Muses laboratory wall, because they both broke over a couple of years of not playing. And when I returned to them, they didn't operate. I guess the room they were in had too much moisture or something. But so then I was like, when I returned, because I kind of took a break after Clouseau, 10-year run, one band trying to make it. I got way into video for about 4 or 5 years. I did not I barely played guitar, man. I mean, I pretty much took a break. It was hard. I just got a little burnout on trying to make it. I put so much into the band thing for about 14 years, even though 10 of it was with Clouseau. And I just needed that break. But when I returned to it, I wanted to go with tube amp. I wanted to get analog pedals, and that's what I've done. And I need to get to a point where we are recording again to have the excuse to buy some more pedals, because I'd like to get more than I have. But nonetheless, that is the route I went. Yeah.
It is such an addiction, man. It's the most. Somebody joked around when I told you earlier, I bought my son a new bass for his birthday.
Yeah.
And somebody said, "Oh, congratulations. You just introduced him to the most expensive habit there is." And I said, "Trust me, I know what I'm getting him into."
Yeah.
Okay. All this.
Totally.
But and my guitar player for Fighting Giants and Days last night, Jeff, he sent me a picture today. He was at work and he does sidewalk concrete repair. And he sent me a picture. He said, "Hey, I've got these," it's like 3 valve boxes in a driveway. He said, "I got to do this concrete repair, blah, 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 blah." And then he zooms over to the back of a car and zooms in, and there's a Earthquaker Devices, sticker on the back.
Yeah.
It's nice. A pedal company, and he's totally nerded out. I got him hooked after, I use that, the Afterneath, the Earthquaker Devices Afterneath is the pedal that I use for a lot of that weird ambient stuff, like what you heard in the clip you played from us,
right? When
it gets into that weird stuff that's on my side and the pedal where it dials in, and then that's the Afterneath from Earthquaker Devices. And I reached out to them before we started filming for the Musee and asked if they would be interested in having their pedals featured in the series, and then try to see if they wanted to maybe partner up, and they declined.
Did they decline? They responded and declined, or
they declined in the form of no response.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought, because I mean, it's so hard explaining what this concept is. And we didn't even have anything recorded or filmed yet, nothing recorded even. I mean, so very hard to explain that. But
no, it's tough too, because they're also one of the breakout, insanely top tier. They don't need extra stuff.
They
should.
They need us more than they realize.
They need us more than they know, because
they really want to blow up. It's interesting, the whole relationship with getting sponsored by certain things, because it's it makes a sense and it's awesome, but you do want to use whatever you want to use at the same token, right? So it's nice to be able to switch brands, switch heads, switch guitars. Yeah. It's kind of tough being typecasted to one brand of anything.
For sure. As much as the Splawn is absolutely my favorite amp. Before I got the Splawn, my favorite amp it's a PV 6534. So it's Eddie Van Halen's 5150. Eddie Van Halen designed the 5150 with PV, and it's industry standard heavy metal amplifier.
Yeah.
And when Eddie left PV and partnered with Fender and made his own EVH brand, PV continued to make the amp in the form of the 6505. And the 6534 is just the same amp with EL34 power tubes. And I have one. I literally have it in the opening scene of our episode 1, where I'm waking up. The amp behind me, it says Dick's amp on it. That's my 6534. And that amp actually just blew up the other day. I didn't realize it. It was in Tallahassee, where my band practices, and I had left it on. And I left town. And I had left it on. The poor thing was on, and it had to have been on for several days. When I got up there, the switch was on, and it was off. So I took it home, but earlier, just today, I took it home and I took it apart. I found the where it got hot and where it actually it melted through on an 8-pin connector, and I repaired it. And it's that's by repairing it, I just got rid of the connector and resoldered the wires connection to connection individually. So instead of an 8-pin socket with 8 wires to another 8-pin socket with 8 wires, it's 1 wire to 1 wire connection to connection point. And I soldered each one of them, and it came on. It came back to life. And that,
Beautiful.
you know, that thing's been kicking. The manufacture date was like 2012.
Nice.
So it's an 11-year-old amp. Got to keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, I think a lot of things have the character of the older sounds and everything. I mean, you know, what? It's 50 years old. God, let me turn it on. Let me hear it. You know, like that's kind of a thing, isn't it? Like that's more desirable than brand new in a lot of ways, like some relic that you pull out of some, you know.
Oh, dude, totally.
Like some treasure chest.
It's and there's a place for the other stuff, you know, like, I mean, I can see touring with like the Fractal box or whatever it is, the simulator processor, because it's so advanced now. It's not like it used to be, and now it actually sounds like a tube amp, and it does.
Is that what Axe Effects calls their unit? Is it called a Fractal, or is that a different thing than an Axe Effects unit? Because those are still pretty revered, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know enough. I don't know enough about it, but I think if it's not the same thing, it's similar. Yeah, it's a modeling processor amp that comes in a rack mount case that has basically like what the pod started. Line 6 pod was the breakthrough thing where, oh man, you can dial in a Mesa, a Marshall, you know, like
the little kidney-shaped Wonder unit. I was like, oh my god, it sounds so good, even though couldn't play that well yet.
I had my first real head was the Flextone 2, which was the pod, but it was in a 200-watt amplifier head. And that later, like I think around that same time when Tool came to Tallahassee and they played the Civic Center, Meshuggah opened up for them, and Meshuggah was famously using nothing but Line 6 pods, the actual little kidney pod through house PS with no amps.
I did not acknowledge that that's what they were doing during that.
Yeah, that was their thing. Like they were like, we're gonna do this tour. We're Meshuggah. And literally no lie, they started this whole thing, like this whole gent thing was deep detuned 7 strings, but they toured with nothing but pods. So it was like this clean, empty stage. A drum set, a bass.
I don't know why I didn't pick up on that at the time. That's crazy.
Yeah. I could, well, I was, because I had just got that Flextone and I was just following. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think the first time I heard about Meshuggah was when Jack Osborne played Meshuggah on the Osbournes TV show. Like he was feuding with his neighbor. He was pissed off at his neighbor. He's like, oh yeah, well, fuck you, guy. He's like, this is Meshuggah. It is like he plugged him. It was like, this is brand new Swedish death metal. And he blasted it. I was like, what the hell is that? That's amazing. Like, oh, I got to go listen to the album now.
The first time I heard him was just because they were opening for Tool. And it was a Tool show that I saw before they came to Tallahassee, because Meshuggah opened for Tool quite a few times on different tour legs. And that's how I first heard about him. Same with the Melvins. That was the first way I heard even that they existed and stuff like that. But I want to get back to a couple of things in regards to the recording experience over at Brett.
Totally.
There's something that all right, for one, Record with Lee is great. Amazing chemistry with him and everything too. And then we recorded with Applehead Recording, and that was great. That was Michael Birnbaum and Chris Bittner. It was 2 different producers. So they worked together.
That's Applehead. They're in New York City, the same guys that did
Coheed Woodstock, New York. And it was an amazing experience getting to go out there. We got to stay on it's basically a ranch, and it's a converted old church barn thing. So it was the most impressive physical studio that I'd been in. It was so neat, huge, high ceilings with rafters and stuff. It was so cool. In fact, you know, I've got one clip here. Let me play this real quick. This is what the sound came out like recording with them. This was Kill Clouseau. This was the first single released from that.
fierce, but under black, you're not what you seem.
So it was cool, man. Like, we recorded
Yeah.
some fun stuff with them. That was Kill Clouseau, Trace. You can find it on YouTube. You can find us on Spotify. And Clouseau is spelled the same way that it is for the Pink Panther. That's where we got it from.
But
But
you know, I have so much trouble spelling that. Like
Clouseau. Everyone had trouble spelling it. We were called so many things on flyers for when we would go play shows that they'd have it wrong. We were
really.
yeah.
I would never read it and not understand how to pronounce it. It's just thinking back, like, okay, how the hell do I spell Clouseau?
It was so hard for people to find it. Yeah. It's like
But that video was so cool. like,
oh, thanks, man. So that was the Panasonic DVX 100Bs. That when I came back at those cameras, I was still using, even though we had moved on to our second album, our sophomore album, and had recorded with Applehead. I still was just in possession of those cameras. So that's standard definition that I up-res to HD at the time. And we did it all with a green screen. I had no idea what I was doing. And man, did I have to figure out, the reason it looks as animated as it is because I realized how wrong I filmed the green screen stuff. And I shouldn't have even really attempted it with those cameras because it just wasn't a good enough codec. And so the solution was make it look go animated, because then it was like it covered up how bad the green screen work was. And then it became, I say this to everybody, take your weakest thing. If you fuck up something, turn it into the strong point, like build the whole thing around it. Then you got something new, it's something that you wouldn't have thought of doing.
That's your phrase. I mean, I've heard you say that so many times, and it's it's counterintuitive, because make your strong points your strong points. Focus on your strong points. Well, not always, not with everything. I mean, sometimes the weakest link sometimes isn't the weakest link. Sometimes that, especially in anything artistic, sometimes that weakest link is where the magic is.
It might have the most character. It's the original part that's the screw up that nobody thought to do, which makes it almost original, and then you build around it, you end up with some kind of unique style. But what I wanted to point out about that recording is that it's like, so we recorded in this epic room, and I'm happy with how it all came out sounding and stuff. But Brett, what's crazy about Brett is that, to be honest, the studio that he has at this point is ultimately a home studio. I mean, you're going and you're recording at his house, and the sound comes out as big sounding as it does, and yet it's just a house. Like, it doesn't even compute to me that you could actually get the sound to be so big coming out of a home studio,
Things starting to just sound the same. Let's show them that our hearts cannot be tamed. Our hearts cannot be
dude, it's
home studio.
It's a homestead. Now, I will say his drum room is like, it's a room in his house. It's not this cathedral drum room, but he is also very savvy when it comes to construction, and he built out the ceiling in the room to accentuate the size of the room. I mean, the man knows knows how sound waves travel. He knows how phasing works. And it's like, okay, he specifically set it up here, not here, because of the miking and because of the placement and the size of the room. And it's like, he has the ear for it. And that goes 1,000 miles farther than anybody behind a board,
Oh, totally. I mean, it's just, I find it amazing. And it's a completely different vibe recording in a, I mean, look, I'm not trying, recording in a home studio, the vibe of that versus recording in a classic traditional studio, it's a completely different feel in that there is a relaxation to it. It doesn't feel like there's as much pressure, but then you're coming out of it with the product that sounds just as big as if it was recorded in the full-fledged studio, because the gear's there, the knowledge is there, the style's there, and it's in a comfort of like a very casual feeling setting. I mean, it's not like he's just got it all set up in his living room. He has rooms, a huge chunk of his house is dedicated to this function. So it's not like just somebody in a bedroom with I mean, he's got a full setup going on, but it is amazing because I recorded in this giant converted barn church thing with cathedral ceiling. I'm like, you have to, and I'm told, you need that to get big sounding drums. And apparently you do not. You don't.
That's why I was saying, don't, the people who aren't afraid to break the rules sometimes to go against the grain, and then, turn out results. Like Brett, man, he blows me away every time I go up there, and the stories that he gets into, I don't even want to, I can't even go into it anymore. It's just, it's too much. Well,
and like what he did with you guys and the Fighting Giant stuff too. I mean, that's when I was first working on the video stuff for your visual, to make it a visual EP on those songs that we picked out. I mean, he made you guys sound so, I was like, holy crap, like Brett's killing it. I was just getting introduced to his recordings. I had just done Defy the Tyrant's music video and was very impressed with their recordings. And I would play some of theirs here on this, but unfortunately, I think that it would flag our thing for copyright, so I can't do that. But what I could do is play a little bit of Fighting Giants real quick because it sounded so good.
Ripping the words from within, emotions control actions made. I need to be free from myself, free from the demons within. Ripping the words from within, emotions control actions made. I seek to be free from myself, free from the demons, and I face myself. As I come
I mean, same studio, home studio. And man, and guys, if you haven't seen that visual EP, that is really the project that me and Dick's journey began. I mean, it started with the Defy the Tyrant video, but this was focused on some of your music specifically. And the idea that you were so game to do a story, a visual EP thing. This was a short film music thing I wanted to do. It's so fun, guys. Check it out.
We'll have to do a whole episode on that. And
I agree.
When you played that, it brought up some memories. Like I realized that guy, one of the ninjas, his name is Brandon Ash. Okay, this is him. This is my illustration of him. Brandon Ash at the time was studying martial arts at Tiger Rock Taekwondo in Crawfordville under the tutelage of Jason Adams, and Jason Adams is the guy behind the mask in that video playing the tyrant, and Jason is a ninja, 7th degree black belt. But Brandon Ash now, I don't know if you know this, Ash, Brandon moved away and he is the instructor at his own Tiger Rock Academy.
Oh, that's awesome. I had no idea. That's really cool.
he's so badass. He has a brand new baby. You know, it's like it's beautiful. And he was when I met him, he was a kid. He's a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
Black
That's
belt
cool, man.
taekwondo. He's in
That's
our music
awesome,
video.
dude.
It's killer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
But-
that's what
but-
the thing is, like the experience of us doing these projects when you're, it's one thing to be in I don't mean to belittle this at all, but you're in a band, you have the few people that you are, and those are the people that you're ultimately collaborating with. And then you take it to this other thing where you're doing it in these music video film things. And now you're getting to meet all and collaborate directly with all these artists that are helping bring some kind of vision together. And you guys were doing a cool thing too. That's just seems to come natural to you guys because you already grew up together, but you had Kurt from Defy the Tyrant in the on that visual EP because he sang as the co-singer on that other song. It was actually the first song that you were planning to make the video for. And
that was the band was Inside the Nine. My tattoo's hard to read, but Kurt has the same tattoo of this, the 9. It's actually like a bass clef with the 2 dots and all that. It's an upside down 6. We had a band together. We were in his is the reverse side. We got on the same night. Jay Daniel did our tattoos, and we had a band Inside the Nine, and Unravel was one of Inside the Nine's songs. We redid that song. That was our first single with Fighting Giants. It just made sense. Kurt and I grew up together, Dave and Kurt and myself, and his vocal style, him and I, and we need to get him on the next podcast. Him and I had a 2.5-hour discussion the other night, just about the journey and like where we are now versus where we were then versus where we were when we were kids. You know, the whole coming of age story, doing this thing we're doing. But I mean, guys, doing a music video in this fashion, like when Ash told me, how about, because the story that I had come up in my mind for that video was too much for a 3.5-minute song, right?
Totally. And then I was like, hey,
how about we do this? What if we did more than one song? But I mean, it's music videos are the best way to really convey what your emotion and what your captivating perspective for your song is.
Yeah.
And what better way than to hire, selfish plug, hire Ash Von Chamier to do your video.
It's fun. I like to make music videos the most. I stay so busy with the company work for branding on, and I enjoy that too, especially if the product's really cool, like the Trans Am stuff. But without doubt, my home base is the music video stuff. And I try to provide the discounts that I can to make that happen, because it obviously doesn't pay quite as well with independent artists, but that being said, to me, it's worth it to do it anytime I can. And the past couple of years has been very dedicated to the Cue the Muses project, because that's eaten up like all the additional free time possible trying to make this thing that we've been working on for so long. But that's worth it in itself. It's its own beautiful thing.
For sure. Well, and to circle back to where we started with recording, the recording process of doing both Cue the Muses and with Fighting Giants, and I'm sure with Kurt with Defy the Tyrant, there's the comfort level for the vocalists at the space. When we did Cue the Muses, COVID hit. So we were still in the writing and recording process through 2020. It was like, I remember Cody, there were 2 of our vocalists for this album that went alone to the studio. It was Cody went by himself to track his part on Afraid, and Kurt went by himself to track his part on his song. Yeah. And we unfortunately, as amazing as it would have been, we couldn't have done it. But Brett opens his home. I remember texting Brett, like, hey, I know COVID's here. Cody's gonna come, and he's a little worried. And you know, Brett was like, "Oh, don't worry, I already had COVID back in February. No big deal. Come on."
Yeah, and that was
I
the
mean,
weird thing too, dealing with the COVID thing and like spacing everything out. All the singers sending out, the scheduling of it was weird, and Brett was super flexible about that. You know, he really didn't. I mean, not that I'm sure he wants us to advertise that he'll do that all the time, but he did not upcharge us for that process. You know, when we explain, look, I'm sorry, we love this idea of all these singers, but unfortunately, we cannot all come at the same time. And one more thing I wanted to mention too, you mentioned the comfort level for the singers. I want to talk about the comfort level of the guitar playing and like recording my guitar. You know, the other experiences that I had at the other studios, the guidance for the takes, like Brett as a producer he's the most, he was the freest experience that I had out of that. And I think that really worked. And when I say that, I mean, there was because the music is kind of progressive and Kill Clouseau was kind of progressive back in the day. There's this kind of association of it needing to be absolutely stringently tight and on point, like exactly, almost like, you know, on exactly on the beat, every single thing.
A perfect take every time.
And so that's what we would strive to get. And it was a process, you know, to nail it absolutely perfect on some songs that were as complex as they were. But with Brett, he, you know, there's less of that, way less of that. And I feel like even for, I don't know if, you know, for some people that would be the right way to go. But for the way I play, I do breathe a little bit. And I mean, I don't mean that it's like, I'm not trying to make an excuse for not being able to play like exactly on the beat. Like I can end up doing that, but it's, the breathing part is like part of how I come up with the parts. And I like that. And I was like always wondering, I guess it just doesn't sound good that way, is the assumption that I kind of landed on in the other recording experiences. And then Brett had this style. It's like, so he'd ask you after the take, so what do you think? And I mean, I was like, I thought you'd tell me how it was. You tell me. And he's like, well, how do you feel about that one? Is what he'd ask. And I'd be like, I mean, I thought it was pretty good. It's like, yeah, I thought it was pretty good too, you know, or I was like, I don't know. I feel like I could have hit this one. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, you know, and maybe on this one part, focus on that one part would be a little bit like this. It was like this gentle guidance and this open-ended thing. So much, it was so much more of just getting to play longer sections at a time. And I think for the style of the music and the way that I write, like that worked really, really well for the end result of how these songs came out.
Yeah,
for my playing style.
He's so adaptable, right? Like when something goes wrong, it's like this. It literally it's like this. It's like, it's not a race, bro.
Yeah, that's an exact quote.
Like, you're way out front, and the drummer's back here. Like, hey man, this is where the groove's at. Like, just slow down. Or it's like, okay, man, drummer's way out here, and you're like, just get right. Just don't get in front of him. Just get right behind.
This demonstration is representing Brett's back to you because he's facing the computer, and then after your take, he'll turn around and talk to you and say the quotes of which he just said. So yeah. I mean, it's super gentle. It's super casual. And so it's like the combination of it being the studio atmosphere that it is, where it's more played down, and then on top of that approach to a recording style where it's just, you know, it's a lot more open. The takes can play longer. It's not like it. I think it felt a little bit more collaborative in that, you know, it's okay if it's not exactly like some certain thing. It's like we're feeling out, how did it feel? Like, how did it actually feel? How did you feel about how it was? You know, it's not like so dissected. And I think there's
it's not, was it perfect? Was that perfect?
Yeah. It's not about it being perfect. It was more about, did it feel better? And I think this kind of music in general, that's not the approach that most producers take. That's not been my experience. It's more about perfect takes. And I think that the end result of this, the way I feel about the recordings is that it proves to me that it does not need to be that way for this kind of music. That, you know, I mean, this kind of music also comes from roots of loving bands that would jam out for 20-minute songs, you know, and that stuff's
Yeah.
not perfect. It's like it's more about how it feels.
Yeah, it's where's the pocket, where's the emotion,
Yeah.
it's exactly what you keep saying. I read somewhere in a band, I don't even remember who it was, but it was two members of the same band, and one of them would say, I think this needs to be like this, and the other person would say, well, I feel that this needs to be like this. And that's two different tactile, descriptions of different musicians, and that adaptability as a producer is important.
Yeah.
You have to understand the kind of artist that's in your space, and I feel like he's connected with that because
Yeah.
everything from when Tim was tracking drums and how Tim and Brett have a previous relationship. I feel like Brett was a little hard on Tim in a couple of those takes in there, but that's because he knows Tim is at this level. And when Tim wasn't, if Tim wasn't for some reason hitting that level, Brett would just stop it mid take. And I could hear Tim like, hey, what are you doing? And Brett's like, what are you doing? And like, you're not being Tim, be Tim. Okay, be Tim. 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah. No, it's funny thing that chemistry.
Yeah, he did it. He did it with John, my drummer, too. Like we were working on this song. It's not released. I'll play it on a future episode. It was there was like a drum fill. The song begins with a like drum fill, and John was like trying it, and he's like, and he's like, no, and he's like. And John literally said, because we can hear him, the drummer's in the booth, and we're in the studio, and I could hear John. He said, no, just scrap the fill. And Brett says, oh, track the fill. Yeah, track the fill. 1, 2, 3, go. Nice. But then John fucking nailed it, and it's on the record. Well, it's unreleased, but it's on. Eventually, we'll release that song at some point.
Nice. That's beautiful, man. Well,
we're at 51 minutes.
Yeah. There was one. Unfortunately, two things. One is I totally had pulled out a clip that had both that showed Kurt singing on that Fighting Giants song, and it unfortunately I realized in looking at the thumbnails I accidentally exported the same clip twice, so I've only got the first one, so I apologize. I will play the one with Kurt in another episode, I swear. I had a perfect segue where you mentioned it, you were talking about him, and I went to cue it up, and I was like, that's exactly the same thumbnail as the other side. But then the last thing I wanted to do was, and this is just a quick 40-second clip, but I have to at least play one recording of Lee Dyess that he did with us. This was the first recordings we did with Lee Dyess with the Kill Clouseau project. And this is also the first music video I made with those old cameras. Guys, this is 12 or like 12 years old.
What's the name of the camera again? What kind of camera was it?
Panasonic DVX 100B. These things were a big deal when they first came out to the prosumer level. I bought both of them for like $2,500 each. Dude, at the time.
Is Panasonic even a thing anymore? I remember
totally.
Panasonic.
No,
Panasonic
they're
used to be this huge thing. They are still okay.
They're absolutely still a thing. There's Panny guys, and they make beautiful cameras. I've been in Canon and Sony and Redland, but Panasonic is still very relevant and makes great stuff too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Here's the one short clip, but check out these effects, guys. This is back in full screen mode too. So
what year? Wait, what was the year?
I played it wrong.
This was the year?
I want to say this was, I think this was like this might have been 14 years ago. This might have been 14 freaking years ago.
So that would be like 2009, 2008.
No, it was before that, actually. Yeah, it had to have been. Well, you know what? Maybe it was 2009. Come to think of it, maybe it was 2009. And
was I in Tallahassee playing in bands? Like in the same time frame as when you made this video? Okay. So then it was after 2005 5 or 6 for sure. So
Okay.
that's that's my, because I was gone for a while. And
I think it
came
might have
back.
been 2008, 2009. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's what it
well,
was.
So this is like all the effects. Oh my goodness.
You
the
got to play
effects.
into your weaknesses, you know? And that was, so we were like all
What is
shitty superheroes. We had, this is before,
Yeah.
like, I
What
think
does
this came
that
out
book
before
say?
Mystery Men. Like, we had terrible powers. I was Clouseau. That was my name. If you notice, I was flying on the ground. I could only fly 2 inches off the ground.
Low store. You're out there going down the sidewalk. That was you.
Cody was the
What-
asthmatic Flash, so he could only go 20 feet at a time, but super fast.
What did the book say? Was it English for foreigners?
Foreigners. Yeah, Nils was, oh my God, I can't remember. He was the drummer, but I can't remember what his superhero name was. And then Langley, the bass player, was mediocre matter mover. So he could move very small things, you know,
With his mind.
kinetically. Yeah, that was it. So everyone had
Kinetically
shitty powers. And that was actually Cody's brother that we beat up there at the end, the gangster that walked in with the knife and the gun.
Yeah. The knife and the gun.
Look out, he's got a knife too.
A knife, a gun. Oh, watch out for the knife. Don't try to take the gun.
Yeah.
Don't disarm him with the gun because he'll get you with the knife.
It was great, man. I made that video and I was so green at the time. But anyway, fun stuff. And we'll play more Fighting Giants. We do need to have a whole episode dedicated to talking about the making of the visual EP for Fighting Giants, because we actually have, footage of that. We can even show a little bit of that. And it was just such a cool experience. We'll play some of what Kurt's song on there sounded like so people can hear Kurt's voice. Again, we would play Defy the Tyrant if we can get approval, but, you know, you let us know. Pavement Entertainment.
I'm even though I control the Fighting Giant stuff.
You got a whitelist.
I'm worried about DistroKid maybe doing that. So yeah, I'll
before this episode comes out on Friday, you got to whitelist it.
Yeah. So we'll make sure it's good. Cool.
Awesome, dude. We're approaching our
Happy
hour.
Friday, guys.
Yes. Oh, and last thing, Oppenheimer was fantastic. Christopher Nolan's amazing. It's out. It came out on Friday. It's doing very well. People did Barbenheimer over the weekend.
Yeah.
They would go see Barbie and Oppenheimer in the same weekend, and both are doing very well. But Oppenheimer's what I saw, and it was really fantastic. It was really, really cool. Yeah, and Christopher Nolan's one of my favorite directors, so I recommend it.
Good. That's great.
Yeah.
I watched Charlie Day's movie last night.
What's that? What's Charlie Day?
Charlie Day made a movie. Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Do you know Charlie? So Charlie, hold on. I don't want to say it without at least saying the name of the movie. It is Fool's Paradise. And Charlie Day, it's almost like Charlie Day did a homage to Charlie Chaplin. And Fool's Paradise is a story of a mentally disabled person. He's in a psychiatric hospital, and it was you need to watch it. It's fantastic. So Charlie Day's in this hospital, and he can't talk. He's mute, but he can listen. And when people say things, he reacts. But essentially what happens is the mental hospital says, there's nothing we can do for you, so we're kicking you out. And then he's walking down the street, and a film producer an executive producer working on a film played by Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta is had to be one of his last movies. Yeah, Ray Liotta sees him and says, "Hey, I need you." And he's like, "Yeah, come on." And he like brings him on. And of course, they're in the middle of filming this Wild West stupid movie. And the actual actor, who is also Charlie Day, of course, but it's like this guy who looks just like him. He's a real piece of work, method actor. He's drunk. He's like spitting on people. He's like Billy the Kid or something. And he ends up like, "This is your replacement. You're fired." They fire the actor. They bring this guy from the mental institution in, and then he is co-starring next to none other than Adrian Brody. And Adrian Brody's like, Adrian Brody's character is so good. Like you gotta watch.
He's good. I like Adrian Brody a lot. He's very good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. He plays another actor, like, and he plays it in and out of character. Like he's like out of character, like in films. He's like, "Hey man, hey, get ready, stretch up. I'm coming at you hard in this scene, bro."
Nice. What's it on? Is it on Apple or is it on Amazon?
I purchased it on Amazon. I think it was like $14, but you can rent it for like $5 or something. But I was just excited because Charlie Day from Always Sunny is one of my favorite, people. He's just he's so funny. He's like the lovable little silly guy, and it was really fun. It was
awesome,
good.
Man. Awesome. Yeah. There you go, people. There's some movie reviews. Oh, and if you do see Oppenheimer, I do recommend the IMAX experience just for the sound alone. I'm going to go see it this weekend. I'm going to go check it out. It's good, man.
They don't have an IMAX down here where I'm at. It's stupid, but I'm going to go.
Yeah, the thing about IMAX, I actually helped set up an IMAX screen before when I was doing stagehand work back in the day. And so I know what's actually physically behind the screen of an IMAX screen is literally like a bus worth of subwoofers, like height-wise and lengthwise. We had to bring them in, set them up. And I mean,
behind the screen, like the speakers are behind the screen,
physically behind the screen, pointed at you. Yeah. So it's like, there's just no comparison when you go to the other screenings where they just don't have that kind of sound system, and sound makes such a big difference, man. I mean, you could have a smaller screen, even though an IMAX is a big screen, you could have a smaller screen and excellent sound. It's going to be a lot more impactful than an amazingly huge screen and just low sound, And unfortunately, when you go to see screenings that are at later showings at theaters that are a little bit, if it's not as packed, very, very often they just kind of turn that volume down a bit. Yeah, because they're saving money on power. But with the IMAX, I think that it's a much harder stipulation that you have to meet these certain criteria for every screening that you do. So I went to the IMAX screening of it, even though locally I prefer the other theater for overall. But for an IMAX movie, when it's filmed on an IMAX camera, that's a very specific aspect ratio that you can only witness in an IMAX setup screen. It's got a more of a vertical orientation, so you're actually getting cropped off on the top when you go see an IMAX filmed movie at a normal screening. So Christopher Nolan's all film, and he loves IMAX cameras, and so that's part of that thing. Yeah.
I had no idea. I didn't know IMAX had its own, specific ratio. That's
they do. That's what's unique about it. It's taller and it's a full screen rather than just a Super 35 look, the rectangle panoramic. It's actually more of a square. And so you get these wide shots that you just can't really get any other way because the sensor is physically bigger. And it's really cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Anyway, all right, I gotta go. Oppenheimer. Barbie. I'll review Barbie next week.
Guys, everyone, thank you so much for sticking with us. It's been an hour and 2 minutes. We are Cue the Muses. This is the podcast about the show and about making of the show and just about being an independent artist trying to do awesome things on no budget or low budget or zero budget or wishful budget or hand job budget, whatever you want to do. But thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah. And we will have, like, the episodes are up for free for watching on cuethemuses.com. Just go there or find us on YouTube. We'll be there. Bye, guys. Appreciate ya.